Welcome back to our channel where we provide updates and undisclosed narratives on Catherine, Princess of Wales and her royal family. We provide you with the exciting news: King Charles bans Beatrice's husband from royal duties after shocked secret exposed by Edward. Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi, spouse of Princess Beatrice, has been irrevocably prohibited from all royal responsibilities and divested of his honorary titles, marking an extraordinary development that has reverberated across the British monarchy. The ruling, issued by King Charles III at an urgent royal council meeting, follows the revelation by Prince Edward, the Duke of Edinburgh, of an intricate financial system that diverted millions from the royal budget. The pivotal evidence, a clandestine videotape obtained by the prince, exposed Mapelli Mozzi's integral involvement in a scheme of corruption and deceit that has irreparably sullied the family's closest circle. The controversy, seen as the most substantial internal problem since Edward VIII's abdication by insiders, has revealed the weaknesses in the Crown's financial system. It has suddenly redefined Prince Edward, formerly seen as the most reticent and reserved of the late Queen Elizabeth II's offspring, as a fierce protector of the monarchy's integrity. As the palace contends with the repercussions, the narrative of Prince Edward's lonely inquiry emerges a chronicle of mistrust, treachery, and the quiet quest for truth inside the opulent confines of Windsor. Passageway murmurs. On the secret feast evening, Windsor Castle wore its usual luxury and forgetfulness. Honor and lineage were required to enter this event via gold leaf doors. Crystal lights illuminate the marble floors, showcasing numerous lords absorbed in violin melodies and vintage champagne. Every movement and grin was planned to capture the British monarchy's timeless grace. In this stunning landscape, Prince Edward, Duke of Edinburgh, felt a subtle isolation. As a somber, careful guy in his 50s, he did not easily fit into the leisurely flow of people and polite conversation. He strolled to the edge of a dimly lighted corridor where the celebrations faded. He held his phone to his ear and pretended to have a crucial chat with his wife, the Duchess of Edinburgh, who was not present that evening to relax. The tall windows that encircled the gloomy, well-kept gardens caught his attention. A terrifying, precise, and inappropriate sound broke the quiet. Susurrations. They came from a little neighboring room used sometimes as a temporary office or staff retreat. Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi, Edward's niece, Princess Beatrice's husband, spoke first. A London native born in 1983, Edoardo made his wealth in property development before marrying into the royal family in 2020. Tall, with slicked-back black hair, he smiled easily and built trust. This evening, his voice expressed none of it. The newly appointed keeper of the palace's most secret ledgers, Robert Ainsworth, spoke deeper and more cautiously. Prince Edward's heart constricts. His decades of court life experience told him this wasn't hunting or market advice. Edoardo's tone was predatory and restrained. Robert's was nervous. Edward placed his back against the cold damask-covered wall to blend in while listening. Conversation fragments filled the doorway. The Sun Fund is untainted, entirely isolated. That was Edoardo. However, the transfer volume is becoming conspicuous, Robert grumbled. A snide chuckle from Edoardo. Evident to whom we get audit responses. Third-party contribution. Ideal. Untraceable. Edward's neck and spine shivered. He knew the royal finances like his own veins. Solar Investment Fund. No official ledger he approved had the name. Ghostly silk gloves hid a thief's hand. His fingers trembled from frigid rising wrath, not fear. He saw instantly that this was theft disguised as crown confidence. He was consumed by the Windsor instinct to preserve the monarchy and maintain the institution at all costs. He quietly took his phone from his ear like a leopard. He switched to silent video mode on the camera. He photographed the two men's faces and motions via the doorframe's narrow hole. Words may blur, but stance and cadence matter. For the first time, Edward felt the weight of Prince as a quiet custodian of his family's honor, not merely a duty to smile and wave. Talk stopped suddenly. Edward carefully placed the phone away, acting like a conversationalist as the door opened. Robert came first, pale and hastening away like a ghost to disappear into the crowd. Then Eduardo came. He stopped straightening his tuxedo lapel, staring intently at the corridor. Both males stared intensely for a minute. Edward nodded politely, almost undetectably. That episode seared itself in his mind. Eduardo smiles. The popular charm did not captivate upper society and disarm photographers. He smiled, almost sneering, like he had just made a lethal deal, and was sure the world wouldn't notice. A quiet declaration of war. Edward turned and returned to the big hall. Musical notes and sparkling champagne flutes persisted, but everything had changed. The marble floor, once majestic, now felt dangerous. The recording-warmed phone in his pocket appeared heavier than a crown. The game started. His undercover investigation into honor and guilt started in Windsor, the most protected and sacred territory. The financial records maze. Prince Edward's daily routine seemed unchanged after that important meal. He attended scheduled events, reviewed philanthropic reports, and kept a low profile. However, he had accidentally become a reluctant informant at home. He began to creepily observe Eduardo at every family gathering and social function. Before his eyes were disinterested, but now they noticed every movement that showed the man's public face. Eduardo carried a slim leather briefcase with a combination lock to even the most sophisticated afternoon teas. He saw that the property mogul was spending more time in the palace's administrative areas where only keyboards and printers disturbed the peace. His slight urgency, in contrast to his usual calmness, supported the covert tape's claims. Edward examined royal financial reports as a senior member of the Royal Asset Management Council. He spent long hours alone in his office, smelling worn leather and polished wood, studying columns of emotionless statistics. He investigated the slow erosion of the vast royal budget. The effort was difficult and thankless, requiring time and institutional knowledge of complicated accounting laws and prior spending patterns. In order to access the sensitive financial records, which were only accessible to the most trusted, he faced a crucial decision. He found Lady Charlotte Finch, the archivist. Charlotte, young, smart, and professional, was known for her discretion and compliance. For a regular audit, Edward called a meeting to review old land grant paperwork. He felt uneasy entering her archive office, a climate-controlled area, with the smell of rotting paper and computers. Lady Charlotte stood particularly tall, almost protectively. Edward asked her about recent large transactions and fund distributions, and she replied clearly. However, she kept looking at her computer screen or the pile of papers in front of her instead of him. She never stammered or showed uneasiness. Edward, skilled in reading courtly behavior, recognized that her limitation was based on fear, not respect. Cold, overwhelming distrust invaded him. Did Charlotte collude add another layer to Eduardo and Robert's deception? Her employment gave her access to all confidential papers, making her a suspect. Edward applied mild pressure. "I am examining documents related to the distributions to external funds," he remarked, softly, looking firm. "There have been recent irregularities, differences between budgeted and actual expenditure." Charlotte could not move. Her pen-clutching passion turned her knuckles pale. A waterfall of beautiful brown hair hid her face and expression as she tilted her head. After an eternity of silence, she muttered so quietly that Edward had to lean in to hear her. "Recently, Your Royal Highness data was requested to be archived, by hand, deleted from main server access records, with extreme care and no trace. No one was directly accused. She said data erasure, but it was enough. No outsider could control the Royal Archive's digital tool, and someone with authority and high-level access within the palace must have issued the instruction." Edward's inner conflict escalated. Charlotte did not conspire. She was caught in a dangerous game trying to get a point across without risking her life. Edward departed the office with a heavier burden. The plan included stealing and evidence destruction. His investigation required speed. That evening, tension peaked. In his dimly lit study, Edward watched the grainy feast tape on his laptop, straining to interpret each jumbled syllable. The computer's low light revealed his tired face. A new email appeared in the corner of his screen, from a temporary, untraceable address. Edward tense opened it. Communication consisted of just one sentence. No greeting or signature. A murmur from the darkness. Investigate the Sun Fund. It started at that location. Edward's body became stiff. The Solar Fund. The same enigmatic name he had eavesdropped on at the supper. The email, possibly from Charlotte or another unwilling accomplice of Eduardo, validated all information. A subtle beam of light pierced the suffocating blackness. It was not only an indication, but also an appeal for assistance and a direct provocation from inside the very fabric of deception. Reclining on his chair, Edward felt the coldness of the impending conflict enveloping him. He was aware of what followed. He had to enter the core of the Sun Fund, where the real source of the decay awaited. The Sun Fund fraud. Equipped with the enigmatic affirmation on the Sun Fund prints, Edward altered his approach from passive observation to active pursuit. He formulated a comprehensive investigative strategy, using his legal position as a senior royal to get both public documents and classified information pertaining to royal-sponsored organizations. It was located swiftly. The Sun Fund was a registered charitable organization, apparently established to provide educational scholarships and assistance to underprivileged children in developing countries. Its public image was pristine, and its mission statement was commendable. The chairman and primary donor was Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi. In the privacy of his office, Edward started the analysis of the fund's activities. The structure was far more complex and deceptive than he had expected. The Sun Fund obtained significant contributions from a consortium of mysterious private corporations and offshore holding organizations. On the surface, they seemed to be genuine acts of corporate giving. Nonetheless, the monies were often and swiftly diverted via a succession of dubious, high-value consulting contracts and administrative fees sent to other entities' shell firms that, following further examination, were linked to interests managed by Eduardo himself. The funds were being laundered rather than used for genuine philanthropic endeavors. Edward started scrutinizing the timing of these transactions, correlating them with the internal palace ledgers. What he uncovered astonished him. An unmistakable, almost mechanical pattern existed. Whenever a substantial segment of the royal budget allocated for estate upkeep, cultural initiatives, or Commonwealth projects was sanctioned and subsequently disappeared from the records via accounting write-offs or misallocations, an equivalent sum would reappear days later as a donation from one of the shell corporations, ultimately being redirected into the Sun Fund. The charity functioned as an ideal mechanism, a financial alchemy apparatus converting public funds into private riches, all while cloaked in the guise of altruism and evading the oversight of the Royal Audit Office. While Edward meticulously analyzed the data, Eduardo, always the hunter, started to perceive the ominous presence of danger. Although the prince exhibited no explicit actions, his frigid, unwavering stare at family gatherings and the abrupt, incisive inquiries on financial management at council meetings disconcerted him. Eduardo opted to initiate the confrontation, not with proof, but with venom. In a matter of days, malicious rumors started to infiltrate the royal boundaries and permeate the tabloid media. Provocative headlines depicted Prince Edward as a guy covertly resentful of Eduardo's achievements and rising prominence within the royal family. Unnamed palace sources said that the Duke was becoming more unpredictable, overwhelmed by the immense constraints of royal obligations. Certain publications suggested that he was mentally disturbed, claiming he was seeing things that weren't there in official papers. The intensifying defamation constituted a cunning and merciless attack on Edward's integrity. He started to get dubious looks from distant relatives and subtly disguised inquiries for his welfare from other members of the royal household. The media's insinuations about his mental condition served as an effective tactic to proactively discredit whatever potential proof he may later provide. Who would trust a paranoid and delusional Prince Edward felt besieged, but the public assault, rather than dissuading him, fortified his determination. His indignation and resolute determination to save his honor propelled his research, which he now undertook in complete secrecy, sometimes laboring late into the night. The pivotal moment occurred on a tempestuous evening. Rain pounded against the windows of his office, where Edward sat surrounded by towering piles of paperwork. A gentle, apprehensive knock disrupted the stillness. He ascended carefully and unlatched the door. Lady Charlotte remained in the hallway, soaked from the tempest, her complexion wan and haggard under the little illumination. Her eyes, expansive with a blend of dread and supplication, met his. Edward remained silent. He only moved aside to let her in. Quaking, Charlotte retrieved a little black USB drive from her coat pocket and set it on Edward's desk. The gesture was definitive, but imbued with a terrible sense of finality. She remained silent, only gasping for air, gripping her shoulders as if to prevent herself from disintegrating. Edward gazed at the USB, then at her. At that moment, he comprehended. This was the moment. The evidence. The conclusive proof that might alter the outcome. Charlotte ultimately succumbed to exhaustion on a nearby couch, the dread and shame she had repressed for weeks erupting beyond her facade. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was hardly audible, constricted by tears, a startling deviation from her typical cool professionalism. She divulged all the details. Under significant duress and explicit threats from Eduardo and Robert, she was compelled to endorse fraudulent transfer forms, erase digital recordings, and counterfeit financial statements. She was the operator of the erased trail she had cautioned Edward against. However, she could no longer endure the burden of her quiet. Prior to erasing the servers, she clandestinely duplicated the original ledgers, the unmodified financial documents that offered irrefutable evidence of Eduardo's malfeasance. Charlotte's action went beyond mere repentance. It validated that Edward's instincts had been accurate from the first. The little USB drive contained the unembellished truth, the beacon of justice he had pursued amongst the shadows. A frigid but powerful wave of resolve coursed through him. The game was approaching its conclusive phase. Deliberative Council. The Royal Council met at Buckingham Palace's beautiful conference hall, a site with centuries of history, but seldom such profound fear. Prince Edward sat opposite Eduardo and Princess Beatrice at the polished mahogany table, conscious of their observation. He was the accuser, conscious that failure would have far-reaching consequences. They might threaten crown stability. Edward, well planned. He placed the USB device on the table next to cross-referenced financial documents labeled with Sun Fund Scandals. As he began his presentation, he calmly explained the embezzlement scheme's mechanics, the creation of a fictitious charity, the laundering of public funds through clandestine transfers, and the systematic waste of royal budget allocations. Eduardo presented calmly, his face showing a hint of anguish as if deeply pained by the flagrant and unfounded claims. Edward felt uneasy with his certainty. There was a problem. Edward told the technician to project USB data onto the room's massive display screen while presenting the electronic proof. The tech installed the drive. A terrifying, unrelenting message appeared in strong white lettering as the screen flashed. The room appeared to stop breathing. Edward shivers. He personally verified the USB contents hours before. This was no coincidence. This was a counterattack. The movement started with Eduardo. Either Robert or another accomplice remotely accessed and hacked the files or wiped the evidence from the servers before the session. All digital proof vanished instantly. Only Edward's words remained in the thick atmosphere. Eduardo seized the chance. He spoke before the council with agonizing treachery and shattered innocence. He responded, uncle, his voice trembling with fake emotion, staring at Edward. I understand your stress, but this is terrible. Lies based on jealousy and delusion are destroying my family. These words attacked Edward's weakest point, his carefully created tale of his frail mental health already undercut by Eduardo's media campaign. Psychological warfare has entered the council chamber. Princess Beatrice, between her husband and uncle, was distraught. She desperately switched between the two males, shedding sobs. She adored her husband, but Edward, her uncle, had always provided security. She suffered in silence between family and marriage, sincerity and commitment. Her quiet, without judgment, conveyed the sorrow of a heart broken by an unjust choice. Edward breathed deeply and steadily. The documentation was missing. The data is gone. All appeared lost. He kept one weapon unchangeable by hackers or saboteurs. He grabbed his phone quickly. All eyes were on it, since it was unprecedented at a royal assembly and broke tradition. Edward opened a protected application, connected his phone to the palace's internal network, and delivered a single file to royal security's main display quickly and accurately. The huge screen behind the council flashed again. The dark, poorly lit Windsor dinner film replaced the royal crest. The music was distorted by the party's noise, but everyone could hear it. Eduardo's and Robert's quiet, stealthy murmurs filled the room. Like ice particles, words emerged from static. Philanthropic fund. External entity without supervision, totally undetectable. There was no doubt. The room radiated honesty. All color left Eduardo's face. The constructed supremacy facade collapsed. The victim's facade collapsed, revealing pure horror. He searched the room for an empty escape. The mask was removed, showing a man in action. Edward need not speak. His secret camera's calm, unwavering gaze saved the truth. The Royal Decree. The Royal Council's emergency session resumed the following morning, amid the palace's chilly, solemn atmosphere. King Charles III sat at the head of the large mahogany table, his countenance severe and disillusioned. The royal family was there, their emotions reflecting the importance of the event. In the middle of the hall, Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi and Robert Ainsworth faced the council amid a quiet that seemed to echo against the golden walls. As Prince Edward reviewed the video on his phone, muted audio shattered the quiet like a hammer. Eduardo's low voice was heard when he discussed laundering money via the Sun Fund. Princess Beatrice nearby no longer seemed confused or sad. She sobbed as the condemning words rang through the room. She wept at her disenchantment with the guy she loved. She stared at her uncle Edward, expressing grief, gratitude, and awareness. She now understood that Edward's acts were driven by love and dignity for the family, not jealousy. Eduardo looked pale as marble, clutching his last shards of arrogance. The conclusion had been reached, but his pride kept him from accepting it meekly. In a final desperate move, he stared at Robert with a dagger-like glance. "It is entirely untrue," he replied maliciously. "Yes, we discussed the fund, but Robert. Plans were made by him. He coordinated transfers. I only wanted to understand his idea." Robert, trembling since the session began, looked at Eduardo with amazement. He felt the deceit like a physical attack. His only boldness was following orders, scared and submissive. He broke down after being abandoned and accused by the one who had orchestrated the entire affair. In a moment of mental breakdown, Robert lurched forward and began speaking first slowly, then frantically. All information was sent to the council. He explained how Eduardo planned the fraud, frightened Lady Charlotte, and methodically planned each illicit transaction. He described the psychological stress forged signatures and fear of erasing digital trails. Timorous but comprehensive was his confession. It filled in all the gaps and supported Edward's investigation. Eduardo then stayed quiet. He sat immobile, losing his confidence with every Robert sentence. All pretense was gone, leaving no front. The stillness was his last admission of guilt. The enigmatic King Charles listened intently. The king lifted a little wooden gavel and struck it once on the table after Robert's confession. The sudden boom resonated down the passage like thunder. His powerful, stern voice conveyed final judgment. Due to gross abuse of royal privilege, fraudulent crimes against the crown, and evidence destruction, Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi is permanently barred from royal responsibilities, events, and privileges. He will be removed from this family and stripped of honorary titles immediately. He then stared at the shaking accountant and announced, "Robert Ainsworth is terminated from his role as royal accountant and will be referred to the Financial Crimes Bureau for prosecution to the fullest extent of the law." Almost no one spoke after the session. Royal security removed Edoardo from the room, devastated and disgraced. After sitting peacefully with her face in her hands, Beatrice stood up without speaking. She glanced at Edward, thanking him silently, then turned and walked toward the huge doors alone. Edward watched her go beneath the passageway's elaborately carved arches. A terrible melancholy overwhelmed him. Justice was done, but a family was devastated. The silent defender Buckingham Palace fell into an eerie silence in the weeks following the king's decision. Justice was won, but the price was harsh. Princess Beatrice, heartbroken and degraded, left the palace to find peace and quiet. She needed time to recover and accept the harsh truth of the man she had trusted. Edward understood his decision better than words could express. He realized that his important role had damaged his niece's soul in ways that may never heal. Prince Edward returned to work, but his surroundings had altered. He had lost his skepticism and loneliness and gained an unspoken respect. In the royal halls, attendants and courtiers who had previously kept their distance now admired him quietly. Edward merely followed his ideals and wanted no praise. As the monarchy's internal dynamics changed, the adept royal press quickly changed its tale. He became the silent prince as his instability faded. He was lauded for quietly upholding the monarchy's morality, putting duty and integrity above comfort, power, and pride. With renewed purpose, Edward continued his work on the Asset Management Council, now entrusted with stricter oversight and transparency rules to avoid breaches. Lady Charlotte, who had previously avoided him, now approached him with respect. The Sun Fund investigation started when Robert Ainsworth was arrested, revealing Edoardo's sophisticated fraud. Edward spotted a little cream-colored parcel on his desk on a beautiful day at his workplace. The envelope had just his name in exquisite handwriting on it, no stamp, postmark, or sender. He opened it warily. The package included a short printed message and a single photo. "Thanks for keeping the lights on," the letter stated. Possibly taken from a distance, the photo showed him contemplating a window or his papers, free of malice. Instead, it expressed adoration, as if the unseen photographer wanted to record his calm fortitude and unshakable resolve. Edward stepped onto the royal balcony as the day waned. Copper-colored sunset light lit the historic stone walls, revealing their timeless majesty. He stood tall in his custom suit, the air softly flowing about him. Though not a monarch, he was a cornerstone. His unrelenting loyalty, honesty, and acute but underappreciated mind uncovered corruption and restored crown dignity. Prince Edward was the silent protector amid the dimming light, a man who had survived the storm and prepared for the challenges ahead. Edward became his family's humble pride once justice was restored in that tranquil golden light. Thank you for watching the video. Please let us know your thoughts and goodbye for now.